It's time to get started. Thank you everyone for being here with us today. I'm Matt, and I'm going to be leading you through this webinar called Transitioning to ELDs. What are your next steps? So just to start out, if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, there should be a questions panel available for you in the software that you're using to watch this right now. That'll get sent to us. I will wait till the end to take those questions and sort of go through them as best I can. May not have enough time to get through all of the questions, but what we do after a webinar is we take a recording and we send it out to everyone afterwards with all the answers to the questions that were asked. That'll be in the form of a blog post that you can find on the website, but you will get a notification for that probably early next week. So if we don't get your questions before the end of the time, sorry, but we will have those answers for you later. So what we want to do today is really just go through a bit about the upcoming, well, the already passed ELD mandate, which will be final in about a year and a half, and just sort of give you an idea of what to expect and how you can sort of take either yourself if you're a single driver or your whole fleet if you are a fleet owner or manager of some sort, and what your next step should be in terms of getting ready for the enforcement date of the ELD mandate. So to start out, I'm just going to take you through a sort of short overview of the ELD mandate to sort of make sure everyone's on the same page and give you a bit of a brief glimpse at what we're looking at in the next year and a half or so. So basically there's a couple things that the ELD mandate does. First, it's mandating the use of ELDs. So basically within 2 years, all CMV drivers who don't fall under an exemption are going to have to be using an ELD for their record of duty status. It also works to define what exactly an ELD is. We've been hearing the term ELD for quite a number of years now, but technically speaking, there was no definition of it until when the mandate was published in December. So that's really a big part of what this does is laying out what the specifics are, what the companies like BigRoad are going to have to meet in order to qualify as an ELD, and what the different options for actual drivers out there will be. And basically, what all this leads to is being able to record the drive time information directly from the vehicle, so you're not having a driver just record it either by writing it down or switching a button on the recorder saying that they were driving during a certain time. This is actually going to take that information from the bus of the vehicle as well as GPS location, and it's going to create the log automatically, sort of taking away a bit of that manual input so that there's a bit less options in terms of drivers making changes to when they say they were driving or not. So big question that sort of gets tossed around is whether or not this is actually affecting the amount of drive time available and what the changes in that sense are. In terms of the hours that drivers have available, this law in particular isn't actually changing anything about those. Now, there are other laws that may be going through with the FMCSA right now that might affect how what hours of service a driver has. But speaking about the ELD mandate on its own, it doesn't really change anything. You're still following the same rule sets that you were before. The biggest change is, of course, how the logs are done with this new electronic system that's taking the information from the bus. It is simplifying how the logs are done in a lot of ways. Drivers don't have to have as much input, but it is taking away some of that flexibility. And when we refer to flexibility, what we usually are actually talking about is cheating. And the truth is, cheating will be harder for drivers. So if you or your drivers have been getting your loads in by shifting a few minutes here or there, that's not going to be really doable in the near future. So it's something that you're going to have to sort of get on board with, trying to change that behavior before you're mandated. You're going to be running into a lot of problems with law enforcement. So just to go over sort of the current options you have for today, We have paper logs that are what everyone pretty much knows. They're familiar, they're editable. Big sort of cons with these are that they can be messy. We know for a fact that a lot of officers find it trying when they get a logbook that they can barely read because it's just chicken scratch, and that can actually lead to some violations if you're not careful. You can get a violation for an illegible logbook, and it's easy to make mistakes with doing the calculations, making sure you actually put in the exact time and everything like that. So then there's an electronic logbook. And I'll go into a bit more detail in the next slide as to the differences between electronic logbook and ELD. But basically an electronic logbook is any electronic log that's not connected to the vehicle. So the benefit of these is that it produces a lot cleaner logs, and it also will give you warnings about how much time you have left if you're missing something on your log that needs to be there for a legal reason, and they're very quick and simple to use. One of the big issues with these in the past has been that you're going to want a printer because, legally speaking, an officer is allowed to ask you if you're not connected to the engine for a printed copy. And then you get into ELDs, or AOBRDs, up until December as they were known. These are the engine connected logs. These pretty much offer all the same benefits as an electronic logbook, with a caveat that there's a lot less editability, whereas with a regular electronic logbook, you're actually able to go back in and edit the drive time. In ELD or an AOBRD is pulling that information directly from the truck itself, so you don't have that option. So we're seeing a lot of confusion in terms of what these different terms mean. A lot of drivers, a lot of everyone in the industry in general have a bit of difficulty distinguishing between the different options. So I talked about electronic logbook, or e-logs. So again, these are not connected to the engine. So in reality, it's best to look at these as sort of just a paper log that's been created digitally. There's the same amount of editability. Pretty much everything you can do with a paper logbook, you're doing on an electronic logbook. Some things, there might be GPS involved in order to automatically track where you are when you make a duty status change. But besides that, there's not a whole lot of difference. Again, you might need a printer if you're not connected to the engine. So when we're talking about the ELD mandate, though, the ones you want to look at are the three to the right of electronic logbook. So EOBR, AOBRD, and ELD. So EOBR and AOBRD are fairly interchangeable for our purposes. They are previous iterations of engine-connected log rule sets. The one that we're currently working under and have been running under for a while now is AOBRD. So when you're looking at it, there's not a whole lot of changes between those previous rule sets and the ELD one. Main difference being that GPS will no longer be optional. You're going to have an ELD that has GPS, and a bit of a difference in how edits can be made. Previously, it was supervisors that were allowed to make edits with AOBRD. Whereas with an ELD, it's going to be the driver that has sort of the final sign-off on when an edit's made, and that makes a lot of sense because in the end, it's the driver who's responsible for that log. So that's sort of some of the small differences that are there. So now let's get into the timeline of when this is going to be happening. So the publication date was in December of this past year. So that started a 2-year window, which we call the window to the enforcement date. So that it's actually December 18th, I believe, is the actual final date in which ELDs are going to have to be used by. So basically that's about 1.5 years away that you have that window in order to start the transition period. Then there's something else called the 4-year AOBRD compliance window. And what this is, so if you currently have a system, an AOBRD system, which actually is what BigRoad's DashLink currently is, we are working to have the BigRoad ELD out shortly. But the current system that we've had out there for almost 2 years now is actually an AOBRD system. So people with these systems are going to be able to continue to use them until December of 2019. There may be some benefits of that. There's a bit more relaxation on the rules for an AOBRD compared to an ELD system. So that offers a lot of benefits to some people for having that extra 2 years. But for the most part, it's easy to say that by December of 2017, everyone's going to have an engine connected log of some sort. Of course, with the exception that some drivers do have some exemptions. So who will have to comply with this mandate? We kind of work under a rule of thumb here that goes along the lines of, if you have to maintain a record of duty status currently, then you're most likely going to have to be using an ELD come December 2017. Now, we do have a few exemptions to that. So we'll talk a bit about what the common questions are we're getting on whether or not you're going to get an exemption or not. So by far the most common question we hear is, if you're a single owner operator, do you have to comply with the ELD mandate? So in this situation, yes, you are going to need an ELD. There is no exemption based on size of fleet in the ELD mandate. There's actually been a fair bit of confusion out there. I'm not sure where exactly it's come from, that some people have heard that there is no need for an ELD if you are a small fleet or a single driver, but it's not in the ELD mandate. There's no exemption. So please be aware of that. No matter what size of fleet you are going to have the ELD if you don't meet one of the other exemptions. Now, the next big question's around the short haul exemption. If you run mostly local trips and maybe have an occasional longer trip, are you going to need to comply with the ELD mandate? So in this case, no, you're probably not. There are exemptions based on the amount of distance that you're driving. Sorry, not the amount of distance you're driving, but the radius from your home terminal that you're driving. So this is about the standard 100 or 150 air mile radius. Those local area drivers won't have to have an ELD, and there is an exemption for if you travel outside of that area. It's called the 8 in 30 rule, and that basically means that as long as you're not driving outside of that radius more than 8 days in a rolling 30-day period, so it's not a monthly period, it's a continuously rolling period, then you won't need to have an ELD. You'll be able to use a paper log for those days, as long as you're not going over those 8 days. So if you're going to be on the fence, where sometimes you might be going in a 30-day period 9-10 times, you won't be exempt on those days, so you would have to have an ELD. So it's important to sort of plan ahead and know what your requirements are going to be. The next exemption we get asked a lot about is older vehicles. If you run on an older truck, are you going to need to comply? So no, provided you're using a truck manufactured prior to the year 2000, then you'll qualify for an exemption. So basically, manufacture dates from 99 or older, you're going to have an exemption. So lucky for you, you don't have to get on board right away. Now, that doesn't mean that just because you have an older truck that you can't get an ELD, or that if you have a mix of years of trucks and don't want to have to deal with using paper for some and using ELDs for others, that you can't just use an ELD with all the different ones. This was basically put into place because some vehicles older than that don't have the connection that would enable them to have an ELD that would work, but a lot do. So you have to look into that yourself to find out whether or not an ELD would be a benefit in that situation or not. And the last most common one we get is about driveway and towaway operations and whether or not you need to comply. So there is actually an exemption for driveway and towaway operations, so you won't need an ELD. Basically, the idea behind this was, if you're only ever seeing a truck once, maybe twice, and then it's gone, do you really want to have to spend the money on installing something into it? With BigRoad, we're pretty much a plug-and-play solution. You plug it into the diagnostic port, and then you can pull it out right away. So this really wouldn't be a problem. But I guess it is nice to know for those operations that you don't have to have an ELD system if you don't want to. Keep in mind if you do a mix of different types of operations, so you do some drive-away tow away, but you also just do regular freight. During the freight hauls, you would still be required to have an ELD. You don't get an exemption on regular freight just because you do an occasional drive-away or tow-away operation. So now we're going to move into the transitioning for fleets section of this webinar. Basically, just to give you an idea, if you're a fleet owner or operator, though it's important for drivers to sort of hear what the method of operations for their fleets are going to be too, but we want to give you an idea of what you should be looking into. So the first thing you're going to have to do is evaluate your needs. So knowing those things like exemptions, whether you fall into them, knowing how many trucks you have, how many you're going to have and have to have an ELD in at any time. This is going to vary a lot from business to business. No two are going to be the exact same. So really, you're the one who knows your business best. So try to find out as much about the mandate as possible and then see where you're going to have to go from there. One big issue could be having company drivers or having owner-operators or a mix of both. This is something we hear about quite a bit. Where you have some company drivers, but some are owner-operators. You really have to set out early on how you want to deal with that. Do you want to have one system for all of your company drivers and then let an owner-operator bring in his or her own system, or are you going to ask that owner-operators also run in your system? There's benefits to both sides. If you're letting owner-operators bring in their own thing, there's probably going to be monetary savings where you're not paying for an ELD system for them. On the other hand, you would be dealing with a lot of different ways to pull in logs from the people who are driving from you. So it could get difficult in that you're not having all your logs in one place very simply. So that's really going to be up to each individual to decide for whether or not their fleet is going to benefit from having that mixture, or you want to get everyone involved in one single system. Just looking at what your current process for dealing with logs is, there's going to be big changes if you're going from paper to an electronic system. I think for the most part, most people would agree that it's going to be good changes because you're going to have all your logs in a single place, digitally stored. If you need to create an archive for them or print out 6-7 months for an audit purpose, they're all going to be right there. You don't have to have physical storage cabinets filling up your office space. So in a lot of ways it's a lot good, but it is going to be a big change for a lot of companies. So knowing how you're going to deal with logs and just filling in that transition phase between moving from paper to digital and planning how you're going to do that. One important need to evaluate is areas of improvement. Basically, you're going to need an ELD system, so why not look at what other areas in your business could benefit from having the ELD system? That way you're not just spending the money just to be compliant with the rule and not really getting anything out of it. If you're going to have to do this, make sure that you can get something out of that. One big benefit, especially with BigRoad, is being able to see how much drive time is available with all of your drivers right from your dashboard, able to see everything that every driver that has maybe 5 hours left of drive time, you know if they aren't going to be able to make a certain delivery, or you know if a driver has a lot more time, you'll be able to send them out. Things like that, just having that heads-up display where you can tell where you can send drivers. Things like mileage tracking automatically done through the back end and through the GPS. Things like that can really help streamline your processes, things for IFTA filing, things like that. And all of this, of course, does affect the bottom line. So with things like safety management, if you're able to get less violations, that could affect the bottom line positively. Or if you only have a system that really just takes care of the one thing, it will affect the bottom line negatively because you won't have as much money because you're putting some money into the ELD system. So really trying to pick a solution that benefits you positively rather than just negatively. So this sort of leads us into what you should be doing when you're actually evaluating the solutions out there. So here are just a few sort of ideas that we gave you based on what we think are important steps. But again, depending on your personal business, there could be a lot of different factors for you, and that's going to change for every company. So really just going back and knowing what you need is a big thing. So one of the first things we say is ease of implementation, and this maybe is a bit more beneficial for a really large fleet where you're going to have to be putting in a bunch of ELDs at once. But again, even small fleets, it's nice to just get it in, get it done. So particularly with BigRoad, again, we're a plug-and-play system, so there's no installation required. You don't have to have a mechanic rip apart your dashboard just to be able to install these things. It's simple to get in, and you can get it installed within 5 minutes, and you're out on the road and you're good to go. For fleets, a big thing is driver reception. If you have a system that drivers actually enjoy using, it's going to be a lot easier to get them on board when the time comes. So making sure that you're looking at reviews of products from the driver perspective, not just from fleet owners or managers who don't actually use the product on a daily basis in the cab. See how drivers are liking different systems, and that'll really give you a sense of whether you're going to get a lot of pushback from them or whether they're going to be more likely to enjoy using the product right from the get-go. Additional services. This is what I was talking about with those added benefits you're going to get. Do you get things like fleet tracking and GPS mileage? Can you create reports for how long your drivers are driving, how far they've gone, how many hours they're working, things like that. So just the added benefits that will make it easier for everyone's job in total. Support is a big thing when it comes to ELDs. This is a piece of equipment that you're pretty much going to have out on the road every day that you're out there. So you want to make sure that there's going to be that support system in there to back you up, to help your drivers out when they need it, and for things like onboarding, making sure when you do start with them that they help you get everything set up, that you know what you're doing, your fleet knows what you're doing. And if there's anything I would definitely compliment BigRoad on, it is this. We have a great support team who knows exactly what they're doing, and I've heard them on the phones talking to drivers, helping them understand how to use the app, and even understanding what rules affect them, because there can be a lot of confusion over what the different hours of service rules are, if they qualify for different exemptions or rules. So we have a great team to help everyone do that. And of course, the big thing that everyone's going to be looking at is cost. What is the cost? What is it worth to you? And what works best for your fleet? Again, this is going to change for every fleet out there. So it's really important to know what you're working with, how much you can afford to put into this, and go from there. So one thing I'd like to talk about before moving on is the ELD evaluation process. So I'm sure some of you have probably heard that there's a list of approved vendors put out by this FMCSA. How this has been implemented is kind of weird, actually, in that it's a self-assessment that basically you say, we are compatible with everything in the FMCSA mandate, we provide an ELD, and then you put yourself on a list. Now, there's no actual check for this, though I think recently the FMCSA has sort of seen the error in this, because they've decided that they're going to start going through the evaluation process on a lot of these ELDs. So we get questions a lot about, we're not on that list right now, and we get questions about why we're not on there. So basically, BigRoad, since it's a self-evaluation, we don't want to put ourselves on that list before we know we have everything right in exactly how the FMCSA mandate is written, because we don't want to put ourselves on there just to say that we're the first on the list. We want to make sure we have everything absolutely correct. And if you do look at the list, there's only, I believe, 3 on there as of today, and they aren't the biggest players in terms of electronic log systems. Most of the large companies that have been involved in electronic logs for a while haven't put themselves on there because they're doing just that, making sure that they have checked every single box on there and that they've done the testing that shows that there's no problems. Because again, keep in mind that when the mandate was published in December, that was basically the start period where everyone got the information they needed to actually build these. The specifications didn't exist until then. So you can't expect it to be built in a couple months afterwards. So most of these companies, just like BigRoad, we have the AOBRD system, the previous regulations, and then we're all going to be implementing an ELD in the next few months. BigRoad, we're looking to have ours out in another couple months. So that's just sort of a bit of a make sure you're looking at the history of the company and the product, if anyone's actually using their products and their experiences with them, as opposed to just looking at that list and saying, they're on here, I'll take them, because it might not be an investment that you want to be stuck with. So now we'll get to the actual transition process. Basically, you've chosen the ELD provider you want, hopefully BigRoad, and then from there, you have to actually start by getting it implemented into your fleet. Again, this process will vary a bit depending on the size of your fleet, but for the most part, it's probably going to look something like this. We recommend pick your best drivers, and that doesn't necessarily mean there's a lot of ways to define your best drivers, but the way we'd say is probably the ones that are going to be most comfortable with an electronic log. Maybe they've already been using them, just non-engine connected. Or they just are a good driver and they don't give you much pushback. So we recommend starting with them, maybe depending on the size of your fleet. Maybe it's just one driver, maybe it's 5 or 6, maybe it's 20. But start with your best drivers and get them comfortable with it, and sort of use them as a test because you want to make sure that you're all comfortable with the system, work out any kinks in the process of how you handle the logs. If you're moving from paper to electronic, you're definitely going to have that step where you sort of find the comfortable workflow for your company. Once you've sort of worked that out, you get through all the issues, you establish your best practices, that's when you can start rolling it out to your fleet as a whole. That way you'll have some drivers who have already been using it that can talk to other drivers for you, help them out. With BigRoad, we do have a great onboarding process, so we will be able to reach out to your drivers or have them contact us, and we'll help them through. But having someone that they know and work with can really help put them at ease, and it sort of makes the process a lot easier. So that's basically how we would suggest the actual rollout goes. One last important thing to consider when thinking about if you're what ELD you're going to be getting is future proofing. And by this we mean any possible changes in rules that the FMCSA makes. So with BigRoad, because it's an application downloaded to your smartphone, we update it fairly regularly. Basically, anytime there's a new rule set put out by the FMCSA, or something suspended like the 34-hour reset or something like that, we're able to update that pretty quickly and get that out to you as soon as possible. So you don't have to worry about having new hardware sent out or installed just because the rule set's changed. We are able to do that remotely, and the app updates and the software goes through, and it's simple like that. As well, if there's any hardware updates, using DashLink, we do it on a sort of month-to-month plan where the DashLink device itself is a $10 a month fee per device. And what that means is that if ever the DashLink stops working, we're just going to ask you to send it back and we'll send you a brand new one. If there's any specification changes with the FMCSA in the future, we'll send you the updated devices. You won't have to worry about having to shell out a few $100s for all new per device devices. It's just part of the lease program. So that's something to keep in mind. How will rule changes in the future affect your ELD? So next I want to talk about transitioning for drivers. And there's a lot of similarities between how a fleet's going to have to transition and how a driver will, but it's from a different perspective. So I like to go over that a bit. And I think fleet owners and fleet managers can get a good deal of knowledge by looking at it from the perspective of a driver as well. So one of the first things to consider if you're a driver is who is going to be making the decision when it comes to picking an ELD. And a lot of this will start out probably with if you're an owner-operator or if you're a company driver. Likely that's going to affect it a fair bit. An owner-operator, you'll probably have a bit more choice over what you're going to be able to do. I guess there's some situations where you could be leased out with a company that may want you using a certain system, but I think for the most part you're going to have that option available to you. Now, company drivers, your fleet will probably have a system that they want you to use, so you're going to have to sort of make sure that you're comfortable with that. So you're going to want to see what the company's plan is. It's going to come up, the December 2017 is going to come up a lot quicker than everyone thinks. So if your company that you're working for doesn't seem to be actively looking into an ELD solution, that's going to affect you come December 2017. So you want to make sure that you're sort of asking questions, getting to know whether or not how you're going to be affected, what solutions they're looking at. So that's where having your opinion heard really comes in. If you say are a BigRoad user and you love using BigRoad, don't just wait for the company to maybe pick something else. We really suggest that you tell them about BigRoad and have them reach out to us, and we can help get the fleet on board so that you're going to be able to continue using BigRoad even after the ELD mandate goes through. For drivers who are using paper, what we would recommend is get used to electronic logs now, and this doesn't necessarily mean ELDs or engine-connected logs. It just means getting used to the interface, getting used to keeping your logs in a digital form as opposed to paper, because you don't want to get to December 2017 and then just all of a sudden have to flick the switch and be expected to use an electronic log day one perfectly. So what we recommend, you can go to either the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store and just search for BigRoad mobile app, and you'll see this logo here, and if you want you can download the app for free. You can get using it and using creating free electronic logs to get a handle on things, and then from there you can sort of start the process of moving over, suggesting to your fleet that you'd like to use BigRoad as an ELD system, or if you're an owner-operator, you can start using BigRoad as an ELD yourself by contacting us. So this is really the key thing to remember for drivers, is that in the end it's on you to be compliant. So your fleet's going to suffer a bit if you're getting put out of service for not having an ELD system, but really it's your livelihood too. So making sure that you're compliant, that you're getting your fleet on board early is going to be important, because in the near future it's going to be coming up quick. And a big part of the ELD mandate has been the idea of anti-coercion measures. So in the past, sort of iterations of this rule that have tried to go through, this was really the big reason that they've been shut down, is the idea that having electronic logs sort of gives a lot of power to the fleets to sort of pressure the drivers into doing more runs than they legally can. So anti-coercion's been a big part built into the ELD mandate. So there's a lot of rules now on limiting how a fleet can interact with a driver. The ELDs can't be able to, I guess the term would be, ping the driver while they're in off-duty or sleeper mode. So the idea is that the fleet can't force the driver into driving more. All edits to logs are going to have to go through the driver, so there's no chance of a back-end administrator going in and being like, oh, well, let's say you didn't drive for 5 hours yesterday, suddenly you have a bit more time in your cycle. That's not how it's going to work. So it's important to remember that if you're being coerced into driving over your hours, it does come back on you. So keep that in mind. There are reporting systems out there. So I know it can be difficult to want to risk your job like that, but in the end, it does come down on you. So I'll just go over a bit more about how BigRoad can help. I think I've touched on this a lot, but just to reiterate, because we do think we're a good solution, at least for everyone to give it a try, and we think you'll agree. But to start, knowing the law, we have a lot of different rule sets out there in the app, so there's a lot of variations, and they all follow, they're all kept up to legal standards, and again, we update those very regularly. So drivers can trust their time limits when they're using BigRoad. The next thing is being able to review logs with BigRoad. We keep a full archive of all your driver's logs, and that's pretty much indefinite. You can limit it if you want to say 7 months, so you have a legal archive if you're ever audited, but we do have a full archive of logs, so you can go through, you can see patterns in issues with certain drivers, and safety managers will really find this easy, having to produce logs. So very simple at a touch of a button. Trip planning, a big thing is just seeing how much time all your drivers have. You can plan ahead, and also having a map of and GPS locations of all your drivers out there is really great. Again, being future-proof. If there's ever any changes to hardware requirements, we'll just send you a new system, no questions asked. You send it the old one back, and you're good to go in a matter of a day or two. There's not going to be any waiting time or extra cost associated with keeping up to date. And then one of the final things is the bottom line. So BigRoad, just to give you an idea of our pricing, there's a license fee, so that would be basically about $15 a month for the BigRoad backend system for each driver. And then each DashLink unit's going to cost $10 a month. So depending how you set it up, you could say it would be close to around $25 per month per driver. There's some systems, some situations, depending on your company, where that's not exactly true. If you had more drivers than you do trucks, you may only want a smaller amount of DashLinks. So that's why it's sort of split up that way to give you the options there. And that's pretty low. Think about the cost of fuel and the cost of tires and the cost of everything you're putting into the vehicles on a monthly basis. It's pretty low cost with a lot of added benefits. So if you're interested in getting started with BigRoad, well, if you're already a BigRoad user, that's great. If you reach out to us and call us, we'd be happy to help you plan your transition to DashLink so that you are ready come December 2017 with the ELD mandate. If you already have a DashLink and you're a customer with us, then you're great. You have actually 2 additional years in which you'll be able to use that DashLink AOBRD. But as soon as the DashLink ELD is ready to go, you have the option to have that sent out to you, and you'll be good to go. So really, there's nothing you need to worry about for the next few years. You're good to go. So if you're completely new to electronic logs, what I would recommend, give BigRoad a try. Just from a fleet perspective, you can go to bigroad.com/get started, and that will allow you to start a 30-day trial with us, so you can sort of see some of the options that are available through using BigRoad, and you get that experience firsthand. If you're a driver, you can again search for BigRoad mobile app in one of the app stores and download the app to get started from the driver perspective. All right, so I've seen a bunch of questions coming in here, so I'm going to start going through them, and hopefully we can get through most of them. I may not have time to get through them all, so I will start now. The first question, I did touch on this earlier, but it may have came in before that, is just wondering, apparently this person's heard that a single truck owner wouldn't have to use an ELD, and is that no longer so? So I never actually heard the rumor at all that a single user wouldn't have to use an ELD. But regardless, there isn't an exemption in place for single users. So no matter what size your fleet is, if you don't qualify under another exemption, you will have to use an ELD. Next question is on BigRoad's iOS support of DashLink with an ELD. It is something we're working on right now, and we hope to have it out in the next couple months. So yes, we will have an iOS version very shortly. Okay. So the one question is about whether or not you have to log in and sign in with BigRoad on your days when you're not working. So BigRoad will just, in that situation, you go off duty. BigRoad will just say you were off duty during the day, and then you can sign those logs at the end of that. You don't have to actually log in. It'll keep you off duty. And it's asking why BigRoad tracks when you're off duty or not working. If you sign out of BigRoad, actually it won't be tracking you anymore. So it stops doing that as soon as you sign out. Okay, so here's a question about if you have a truck and you have, say, BigRoad DashLink and ELD system, can you take the ELD unit from one truck to another? With BigRoad, yes, you can. Pretty much any BigRoad DashLink unit is going to be pluggable into any other trucks. You may require a different cable adapter depending on what type of port you have, but you will be able to transport different DashLink units between vehicles, so no worries there. So here's another question about printing, and just looking for some clarification. The question's asking whether or not you're going to have to print a log with an ELD system. So again, if you have an engine-connected log, so an ELD or an AOBRD, you aren't required to print the log. That is only the case if you have an electronic logbook, which again is the non-engine connected version. So in that situation, though we're finding it less and less, officers are allowed to ask you to produce a printed copy. So we do recommend you have a printer in the truck. With ELDs and AOBRDs becoming more and more common, we're finding that request is going down because officers are becoming used to seeing a digital form. Though some states like Missouri are sticklers for it, so you do want to make sure that you have one. Next question is about, again, about the 100 air mile radius. Again, there's an exemption on that, so if you never drive outside of that radius, then you won't have to worry about ELDs. You should be fine. Okay, so we've had a question about personal conveyance. Personal conveyance basically is when you are using a commercial vehicle outside of regular duty, just as transportation means. And usually you have to be careful because the definition's pretty vague, but you have to be completely unladen, and you can't be using the truck for any purpose related to work at all. But if you do fit those criteria, so BigRoad actually does have a personal conveyance option, and this is settable by the fleet. So the administrator of the fleet is going to be able to control that for the whole fleet. Basically, once you're done and you want to use personal conveyance, it's just a setting within the app that you select, and then you'll start personal conveyance. And really what this is for is because there's ELDs are required to sort of keep a track on the mileage of the vehicle. So this will just basically account for those miles that are driven when off duty. And it'll just make sure that the officer understands that that was personal conveyance time. We had a question about if BigRoad supports mileage tracking for fuel taxes. Yes, actually. So in the BigRoad web app, we have a system called Reports, which basically will allow you to break down either by driver or by vehicle a complete list of miles driven and the jurisdiction in which they are driven. So you don't need to worry about getting complicated and writing down exactly where you entered a state and where you left it and what your route was and calculating the mileage afterwards. BigRoad will actually do that all for you and then produce an Excel file that you can look at to do all the calculations. We've had a question here about possibly looking into BigRoad currently charges on a monthly fee system, and the possibility of looking into a sort of outright package or a yearly package. As of right now, we're currently just still doing the month-to-month service. I don't have any more information on an outright purchase, but it is definitely something we're looking at as a possibility in the future. If a driver wanted to purchase an ELD system outright, that's something we're looking into, and how we would implement that. That's going to be something we look at in the next coming months. So next question's about what happens if you're stuck in traffic. How does an ELD record this? So basically, there's going to be a few different possibilities, but with BigRoad, if you're stopped for a very long time, the app is going to say, you haven't moved in a while, are you still driving? So if you're stuck in traffic, you're going to want to just push the button that says yes, because technically you are still driving. This is done so that if you come and park and throw the truck in park and are just sitting somewhere but didn't turn the engine off, it doesn't get confused, so then you could switch back to being on duty in that situation. Next question's about having more trucks than drivers and how that situation would work. So there's a few options there. Since BigRoad's dash links are pretty movable, you probably wouldn't need to have more than the amount of dash links you have for drivers, because they could move them from different trucks if they're driving different trucks each day. So that's a pretty simple solution. Simple to move around, and different drivers can log into different devices because they're logging into the system through their phone, which then connects to whatever dash link is available with what they're driving. Okay, and the next question is about how our records are maintained and produced. So all of our records, be they driver logs, we have an option for document capture, in which drivers can take a picture from their phone, and that will be uploaded to our servers. So they're all stored remotely in a cloud system, so they're available on the internet. When you log in, you can download all of your driver logs in a bulk file as a PDF, and you can either keep them digitally, or if you want to, you could print them or anything like that. So there's a whole archive available when you have a fleet in BigRoad. Okay, this one's a more general question about rule sets. And the question's about, do I become eligible for different driving regulations when driving between jurisdictions? So in this case, the suggestion's between the US and Canada. So just so you're aware, you basically, whatever country or jurisdiction you're driving in is the rule set you're going to want to follow. So if you're going from the United States into Canada, as soon as you cross the border, you have to make sure that you are legal under those rule sets. Now, the Canadian rule sets tend to be a bit less strict, so it's actually be a bit more important going the other way, with the exception that in Canada you have to keep 14 days as opposed to 7. So you're going to want to make sure if you're going into Canada you have all of those days so that you're compliant under their rule set. If you're coming from Canada into the US, you're going to want to make sure that you've been driving the previous 7 days to the rules in the United States, because it doesn't matter that you were driving in Canada beforehand, you still drove over the amount of hours that are legal in the US, so keep that in mind. So I think that's all the questions we have. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out for the webinar today. I hope we answered your questions, and thank you, and we'll be sending out an email with a recording of this if you want to watch it again. So thank you very much.